Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Podcast. My guests are Olav and Mohammad. Actually, it's Abdul Basit Mohammad, a senior advisor, and Olav Mosvold, a project manager at a company called Avinor, Avinor.no. So, Olav and Mohammad, how are you guys doing?
Oh, doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Yeah, thanks for coming. So tell me about Avinor. It looks like you guys do multiple things. So what's the idea behind the company? What are you guys working on?
Yeah, well, Avinor is the main airport operator in Norway. We operate 45 airports, and we also do air navigation service providing and air traffic management.
Yeah, I haven't flown to Norway. That's why I don't know the name. But now if I do, I'll know. When I see the name there, I'll say, oh, yeah, I talked to some people from that company. They're very cool. So what are some of the, I know there's a lot involved in running airports. What are the top 2 or 3 issues that you guys are working on that are most important to you?
Well, basically, you have to keep business going, keep operations open, maintain functionality and regularity to enable aircraft to land and take off and passengers to flow through the airports and our airspace. But we also do a lot of work on reducing carbon emissions, and we also have some other interesting projects. Yeah,
I've heard jets produce a disproportionate amount of carbon emissions. So, is that true? And can you compare what a jet will produce to a car, maybe at various stages? When it's taking off, what does it put out? When it's in flight, and then when it's landing?
Yeah, sure. It's sort of comparing apples and bananas, comparing an aircraft and a subway or a car. Basically, on emissions per passenger kilometer is not so much higher for an aircraft compared with a car, but it all depends on how many people are on board, both the car and the aircraft. And I guess the main difference is that you wouldn't fly an aircraft to the bakers or to the pub next door, but you would perhaps take your car, and aircraft are designed to take you far with huge amount of pretty quick. So you will not drive your car from where you're at in California to Oslo, but you could easily fly here. And that's sort of the main difference, is that aviation enables us to travel far quickly, and that is also producing that is quite energy intensive, and it's also producing quite a lot of emissions.
And I guess on a global scale, aviation accounts for approximately 2% of the CO2 emissions.
Yes, that's correct. About 800 gigatons of CO2. So that's pretty much the same amount of emissions as Germany. All the emissions from Germany per year.
So what's your goal? Is your goal to just become more efficient and to reduce the carbon footprint of all the airports? Or are you also looking for technologies that will fundamentally change the emissions generated by aircraft? Maybe reduce or eliminate them?
Yeah. Well, Avinor is a state-owned company, so we do all the infrastructure for air travel in Norway. And our task given to us by the government is to provide all the inhabitants in this long, funny kingdom of ours with adequate air travel services. So we are actually tasked by the government to make people, or to enable people to fly, while at the same time we're also tasked by the government, which is our owner, to reduce the carbon emissions, both from our own operations, but also from air travel itself. So literally from aircraft and airlines.
So what do you guys see as the best opportunities to do that? What's the juiciest low-hanging fruit that you want to tackle to reduce emissions?
Well, emissions from our own operations is really, really small in the big pictures. We do snow removal in winter, which is basically 6 to 8 months a year. That requires quite a lot of diesel for our vehicles. We obviously use quite a lot of energy in our terminal buildings, etc. So we can also reduce the energy consumption in our terminals. But to really sort of attack the elephant in the room or the elephant in the runway, we have to do something with the emissions from the aircraft. And I think we can say it's basically like 3 main areas of interest. So the first is to reduce energy consumption in the aircraft itself, and the airlines and the aircraft producers are doing a great job on that. But then we also have to do something with the fuel, reduce the amounts of fossil fuel that's being used. And there's already technologies available in terms of sustainable biofuels for aircraft. And over the last 2, 3, 4 years, actually electrification of aviation is also getting pretty high on the agenda as a viable solution to reduce emissions from our industry.
And I know that your airports never have any delays, wink wink, but how much do delays and idle time contribute to the amount of fuel used and the emissions?
Well, but without having an exact number, I think there's a quite large amount of fuel that's wasted either when aircrafts are in holding patterns above an airfield, and they're just in line to land. You've probably been out traveling, and the pilot says, well, we have to just circle around here for a while before we are able to land. So that's certainly a waste of fuel and of course your time as well. Taxiing from the gate or from where the passengers get on board to the end of the runway to take off can be quite fuel consuming as well, and as if the traffic patterns on the ground and in the air are not planned correctly, of course that all contributes to waste. So there are a host of technologies not related to what sort of fuel you have, but basically to optimize the traffic flows on the ground and in the air that are being employed. I know both in the US, the FAA is doing a lot of work, and here in Norway and in Europe, there's a lot of work going on to sort of enable the most efficient and most efficient traffic flow without any interruptions to basically minimize that fuel that goes to waste.
And you mentioned the electrification. Is it possible, you think, for a plane to fly with no fuel but just a huge reserve of electric power, or battery power?
Yes, it is. A very good question, by the way. We've been involved in electrification of aviation aircraft for a couple of years now, and we already bought our first electric aircraft, a small 2-seater that has a range of about 130 kilometers, so that's 55, 60 nautical miles. We've been flying it all summer. No hiccups, no issues. Really a beautiful plane. There are several of aircraft producers looking into electrification, both of what we call fixed wing, which is like regular plane, but also what is termed eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, or passenger drones, which is getting pretty big as well. So it's definitely possible, and from what we learn from the producers, it will probably not be the technology that will stop this development. It will be other regulatory or political issues that could either halt or delay the development of electric aircraft. So yes, definitely possible. And as I mentioned, we operate 45 airports in Norway, which is quite particular. Many of these airports are really close to each other as the crow flies, because we have all these mountains and fjords in Norway. So a flight could be perhaps 10 minutes, but you will spend hours driving to the bottom of fjord, across the mountain, and then over to the city you're going to. So definitely in Norway, we think that this is a huge opportunity for our domestic traffic in the next decade.
What would it look like? You mentioned you have a 2-seater electric plane, but what would a 200-seater electric plane look like? Would it need a fuel backup, or would it need to carry so much batteries that the weight would be tremendous and make it inefficient, or would it work just like a smaller plane?
Yeah, well, 200-seater, that's a big electric or electrified aircraft. The main hurdle today is energy per kilo of battery. So we think that in the near time we will see small electric aircraft with short range. Most of the aircraft producers today who are looking into this are producing or are looking at concepts which involves some kind of range extenders. They would be like hybrid aircraft. They will have electric motors and a battery, but with the possibility to charge the batteries when you're flying, either by a turbo generator or by a fuel cell. So that will extend the range of the aircraft significantly. There are a couple of very interesting American projects, and also Airbus, the main European aircraft producer, is looking into this. All the engine, what will usually the traditional jet engine producers are looking into electric motors. So there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of research and development in this field. And what is basically driving this is carbon emissions is one thing, which is fine, but also it's the economy of these new technologies. The maintenance costs of electric motors is smaller than for traditional jet turbines, and also the fuel cost will be a lot less. Electricity is basically a lot cheaper than jet kerosene.
Yeah, that's great. So it probably will happen first in places like Norway, where you said you have like 10-minute flights, and then it may spread to commuter flights, 30 minutes, let's say, between New York and Washington, D.C. or something, or Dallas and Houston, and then maybe eventually it'll be longer flights.
Yep. In fact, there is an American aircraft producer called Zunum Aero, based in Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area. They are backed by Boeing and JetBlue, and they already got their first order of 100 aircraft from a small airline in California called JetSuite, that are doing some kind of charter business kind of type of flights. That is, they are utilizing all the landing strips and small runways that are not traditionally used by the bigger airlines. So they have a niche there for flying people between the cities in California and also to some other places. So that's very very promising from our point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Any chance for solar to work with planes because they fly higher up? I don't know. Is the sun's energy stronger up there, or you mentioned biofuels? Any other initiatives?
Solar is obviously an option, but they are not. They cannot provide enough output now for like big heavy aircraft. But there are glider aircraft that are flying partly on solar power, and some very very interesting, also high altitude glider aircraft and projects going on both in Europe and in the US.
A little bit of a sidetrack perhaps, but there are some concepts which are somewhere between a small satellite and a drone. So you have gliders which are able to stay aloft at maybe 10,000 feet. Well, no, more than that. I think
80,000 feet.
Yeah, 80,000 feet height for several months, and they can be up there doing remote sensing and so on, which can of course help for a lot of different sectors and uses.
I have a question kind of out of left field, but it just occurred to me. You talked about a drone. How come they don't have capability for people to fly a plane, sitting on the ground? Like, let's say a pilot or a co-pilot have a problem, they become incapacitated, or something else goes wrong. I know there's automatic pilot, but why not have another backup system where someone on the ground can take over if needed or authorized and fly the plane just as if they were up there?
That's actually a very good question, and I think one of the main hurdles there is that it basically has to do with communication and bandwidth and whatever capabilities that you might or might not have when you're flying around the world. If you're communicating traditionally with something very far away, it's either via satellite or and so on, and that sort of communication link has traditionally not been able to handle huge bandwidths. Doesn't have huge bandwidths and can handle a lot of data. I think that might be one of the explanations, but I think it's a good question and might be something that may be a possibility in the future as of course autonomous vehicles and so on will also change perhaps the public perception of flying autonomously. We all know that planes today they can basically take off and land and fly without a pilot doing much, but there's still this sort of perception that we need a pilot up there, and without a human watching the system and being able to take control in case of emergencies, we are putting ourselves at risk. But maybe with autonomous vehicles gaining a foothold in society, with humans seeing that there might be actually some safety benefits.
And you should also keep in mind that aviation is an extremely risk-adverse business. There's a lot of regulation in our business, and it's definitely technologically possible to remotely operate an aircraft, and the first fully automated flight between the US and Europe actually took place 70 years ago in an American Army aircraft. So that's a long time ago, and as well as we do that your armed forces have a lot of sort of drone capabilities that are piloted from the ground. So technologically it's possible, and you won't have too many pedestrians or bicycles or football players up in the air. So it should also be easy to sort of handle, but it's regulations. It's risk calculations, and but I think that within 2 or 3, 4 decades, we'll definitely see fully autonomous passenger flights as well.
Very cool. What else in the area of AI and automation are people going to experience as it relates to flight?
Well, one of the things we mentioned already, it's autonomous aircraft. I think that's one of the areas where we'll see a staged progression in the field. I think we'll probably see freighter aircraft employ the autonomous capabilities first. But the public perception will sort of have to shift a little bit before they can be used for passenger aircraft. Otherwise, on the ground, there's I don't know if you've been on an aircraft sitting on the tarmac and boarded early, you might see a lot of vehicles moving around the aircraft. They might be taking luggage to and from the hold, bringing your airplane food to the aircraft and so on. And all of that contributes, of course, to both CO2 emissions, and that can be improved by electrifying whatever you have concerning ground equipment and vehicles. But also autonomous capabilities will enter in that field as well. So you might envision a system that an aircraft automatically sends information to the ground concerning what needs to be done to that aircraft. Does it need a check? Does it need a checkup? Does it require 300 liters of fresh water? Does it need what sort of food it needs, and so on? How much luggage it has exactly on board, and you could envision a fleet of autonomous vehicles just coming up and taking care of that. Small robots and autonomous vehicles can do all that, perhaps more timely and more coordinated without putting humans at risk, and do that more efficiently in the future as well.
And we're working on a very interesting project here with autonomous snow removal. We have a fleet now of autonomous snow removal vehicles. So they've been tested for a couple of winters, and this upcoming winter we'll test them at Oslo Airport, actually. Not fully by themselves, but they will sort of be part of what we call the snow removal train, which is basically like 12 or 16 snow removal vehicles driving in more or less procession to remove the snow from the runway. So you can sort of link these vehicles together, so you could have sort of a leading car perhaps in the beginning with a human expert, a driver, and the other vehicles following it. And an airport is a very well controlled area. It's fenced in, quite well defined where the runway is, where the tarmac is, where you should dump all the snow you're removing, etc. So we are looking at this as a very promising technology for our 45 airports, and will enable us to provide a better service for the airlines and the passengers.
Yeah, it seems like air traffic control could definitely do with a lot of automation. Like for instance, if I have 50 planes approaching my airport, and I can calculate forward the trajectory and the speed and all that, I can tell one of them or three of them, hey, delay by throttle back 1%, so then they'll get to the airport just behind these other ones that are coming in, and I should be able to, from the ground, help optimize the fuel usage of all the airplanes, so there's no delays upon approach, so they can just land smoothly or take off.
Certainly, and that's exactly some of the goals of a couple of huge projects. One going on in the U.S. Coordinated by FAA. It's called NextGen, and one going on in Europe called Single European Sky ATM Research. ATM stands for Air Traffic Management, and they're looking into exactly the sort of thing that you mentioned, to have more computing power, more data available, so that humans can efficiently handle more aircrafts and of course safely as well. Because that's one of the things we have an issue with both in Europe and in the US, that actually we have capacity at airports, bar a few very constrained airports, big airports, but actually it's up in the air and around the airports up in the air where you have capacity constraints, and that's mostly related to the mode of operations we have, the air traffic controllers have, and their limits as human beings watching a system, and to be able to handle a number of parameters safely. So that those capabilities will certainly increase in the coming years, and there's a lot of work going on in that sector. But as Olav mentioned, it's a risk-adverse sector, and they are very careful to test and to retest and to really check everything, check all the boxes and so on before these sort of systems are allowed to operate. So what we know has been working will work until sort of the new thing has developed so far that you basically cannot live without it.
Yeah, makes sense. Are you able to? I don't, if you can't, it's okay. But because you have literally like the eye in the sky view of all these airports and all this travel, what do you know or see that the public doesn't know or see? Anything interesting or curious that you know?
Well, many interesting things coming up, I think. Just adapting to a changing climate, a change of jet streams, adverse weather will be interesting for our industry as well. And also just the interaction, so to speak, between the passenger and technology. How can we improve the technology passenger interaction, going through security control, doing whatever you have to do at an airport before you enter board the plane. Likewise, the technology between and information sharing between air traffic control, airports, aircraft, different aircraft in the air, etc., etc. So I think there are huge opportunities coming up for making a safer, more reliable, and more cost-efficient aviation system in the world.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of impressed me when I first got into this sector is how much actually is going on behind the scenes, just so that passengers can breathe through the airport and get from one place to another on time. It's an immense set of actors and technologies that have to work together, and that to me is quite amazing already. And to see that is just going to evolve further and further in the future, I think it's going to be exciting. Of course, this is all made possible by the fact that humans, we do have a need to travel from one place to another, and once you have had the capability to fly across continents in a short while, you're not going to go back in any way. You just have to find ways to do it in a way that doesn't harm the planet and our environment so much.
Very good. So what's the best way for people to get in touch if they have questions or if they want to collaborate? How should they reach out?
I guess there are some contact points at our website, avinor.no, avinor.no. So get in touch with our communications people or our contact details there, and they will distribute requests and questions to us and probably some of our colleagues. I guess that's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Okay, that's great. Well, Mohammad, Olav, I really appreciate you guys coming, and it's really cool to talk to people on the inside and see what's going on with all the airports and planes. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.